So Iran yesterday announced that it is increasing uranium enrichment to 20%, a move that violates the 2015 nuclear deal. The framework for the deal was negotiated under the Obama administration and agreed to by a group of world powers with the goal of limiting Tehran's ability to produce nuclear weapons. But President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the deal in May of 2018 and reimposed harsh sanctions on the Islamic Republic. So to discuss this now, I want to bring in Behnam Ben Taleblu. He is a senior fellow at the think tank Foundation for Defense of Democracies, focusing on Iranian security and political issues. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Behnam. So Behnam, before we get into what exactly Iran is doing here in terms of trying to create leverage or what they're doing, I want people to understand how significant a 20% enriched uranium sort of increase is. What does that mean? It doesn't sound like a lot, but is that a move in a concerning direction?
Well, great to be with you. Good morning, Anne-Marie. Yes, it is a move in a concerning direction, particularly because a state that can enrich to 20%, which technically qualifies as high enriched uranium, can go all the way to what is called weapons-grade uranium, which is usually 90+%. That's what states prefer for fissile material for their nuclear weapons, actually. So in this case, when you look at the data, going from where Iran was, which was just under 5%, to 20%, is a more labor and time and technical inducive system than going from 20 to 90. So in short, states that can go to 20 can roughly go to 90. So that means Iran has done the lion's share of the work to get closer to a weapon. That's why in 2010 to 2013, when Iran first went to 20%, the international community rushed to put on exceptionally tough sanctions led by both the EU and the US on the back end of already tough multilateral UN sanctions.
So Iran's foreign minister tweeted this yesterday. Our remedial action conforms fully with paragraph 36 of the JCPOA. After years of non-compliance by several other participants, our measures are fully reversible upon full compliance by all. And so I guess the question here is Iran trying to build some leverage with the incoming Biden administration?
That's right, and let's not forget that these sanctions are not politically predicated. They're predicated on actual facts on the ground. They're predicated on trends in long-standing Iranian bad behavior, trends on the nuclear file, on the missile file, terrorism, human rights, cyber, you name it. So the U.S. has developed these tools to go after those threats. So if a Biden team is looking for diplomacy, rather than offer premature sanctions relief, it has a lot of leverage to deal with, and it can cash in these sanctions. It should cash in these sanctions, I should say, if and only if there are sufficient changes or commensurate changes in Iran's behavior on each one of those files we talked about. Now, the tweet you mentioned by Zarif is fascinating because it's a new year, but it's the same old Zarif. Zarif's key point in that is that Iran's actions reaching 20% are fully reversible. Now, while he's using this to try to get the U.S. to offer sanctions relief so that Iran can reverse course, he actually inadvertently hinted at a path for future American policymakers here, which is to say, if you ever do get a deal with Iran again, don't predicate that on a political whim or Iran politically offering you to cease adhering to something. Predicate that on a physical constraint on Iran's program, because the reason Iran could go to 20% at an underground bunker today is because that bunker was failed to be shuttered in negotiations in 2012, 13, all the way to 15 that got us that final nuclear deal. So don't settle for political constraints on the program, settle for physical constraints on the program.
Okay, so that happened. We learned about that yesterday, but then this other thing happened in the Strait of Hormuz that kind of threw me for a loop. Iran yesterday seized a South Korean tanker in Gulf waters. The pretext was chemical pollution of the sea, but this comes just days before a Korean diplomatic visit to Tehran. Iran has been demanding South Korea unfreeze $7 billion in funds. What's part of the strategic move here for Iran? What are they getting at?
Well, just as Iran has long used people and acts of international hostage-taking or terrorism to extort states for money, it's also done this with vessels in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. This also is a deja vu moment, most unfortunately. If you recall, just about a year and a half ago, when Shinzo Abe made his historic visit, that was the former Prime Minister of Japan going to Tehran to meet both Iran's President Rouhani and Supreme Leader Khamenei. A Japanese vessel, if I'm not mistaken, was either bombed or taken hostage. I think it was subject to a underwater bombing. In this case, because South Korea has that escrow account with Iranian money, and Iran has long demanded those funds, and South Korea has conformed to U.S. sanctions, this is Iran both trying to put pressure on South Korea to release the funds, as well as to try to get U.S. partners, whether they were Japan in the past or South Korea in the present, who are reliant on Persian Gulf oil or Persian Gulf trade, to put pressure on Washington to cease this policy of sanctions. So this is how Iran is reverting to a tried and true page in history.
You know, over the past 4 years, every time the Trump administration did something that could hurt or be harmful to Iran, there was always this discussion about whether or not there would be retaliation. And we often didn't see significant retaliation from Iran. But Sunday marks the 1-year anniversary since the U.S. assassinated Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Could some of these bold moves be connected to that anniversary? Is timing significant here?
Timing is absolutely significant. I think the outsized thing driving these actions is, of course, the fact that we have a very sensitive political transition coming up in this country. And as everyone knows, U.S. domestic politics has been on full display in the past 4 years, something our authoritarian adversaries have long tried to poke at, prod, change, manipulate, do whatever has been reported in the past on. But in this case, I think Iran still says it is waiting to exact a quote-unquote hard revenge for the killing of its terrorist mastermind, Qasem Soleimani. Even though there were 16 ballistic missiles fired last January at bases in Iraq that housed U.S. and coalition forces, Iran said that revenge is likely to continue. So the escalation that we see by Iran in the nuclear, missile, regional, military domains, cyberspace, Persian Gulf, what have you, could be connected to Iran retaliating for the killing of Soleimani. But let's not forget the outsized thing here is building up leverage before this political transition.
Behnam Ben Taleblu, always great talking to you. I always feel so informed afterwards. Thank you very much.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.